Question number 7, Denise Roach.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Workplace Relations and Safety and says, does he have any concerns that the changes proposed in the employment...
Sorry, I'm going to ask the member to start again, and could I ask the Minister and Mr O'Connor to cease their interchange across the floor of the House. Denise Roach.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Workplace Relations and Safety and asks, does he have any concerns that the changes proposed in the Employment Relations Amendment Bill will weaken workers' rights and therefore make it harder for workers to deal with workplace bullying? If not, why not?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
No, I don't believe there are any provisions in the Employment Relations Bill that make it harder for workers to address workplace bullying. Workplace bullying is unacceptable now, and it will remain unacceptable when the bill is passed.
Supplementary?
Supplementary question, Denise Roach.
Does he consider, how strong a position would a worker being bullied by their employer be in to even negotiate a tea break after his government takes away this fundamental right with their anti-worker legislation?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, I reject the premise in the question that this legislation is anti-worker. Tea breaks and meal breaks are a right set out in the Employment Relations Act, but for many, many years the law provided for some flexibility. That was removed, and it took away some very sensible arrangements that needed to be made in places like sole charge air traffic controls, night shift supervisors in service stations, and in healthcare settings where leaving the workplace would be inappropriate and unsafe. And that's all we're doing. It is not an attack on workers.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Denise Roach.
Does he consider that his government is effectively acting as a bully by taking away the rights of some of the most vulnerable workers in New Zealand with their attack on Part 6A of the Employment Relations Act?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, the question is in a... The question... I withdraw and apologise before being asked.
Order.
And didn't mean to bully the Speaker.
Order. 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 I'm looking forward to the answer, so if I could hear it from Mr Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, the question, Mr Speaker, is an attack on workers. It presumes that they are not capable of negotiating appropriate arrangements for themselves, or that their unions can't protect them if they are felt to be being hard done by. Agreement must be reached. It's as simple as that.
Supplementary, Mr.
Supplementary
Speaker.
question, Denise Roach.
Isn't his government just paying lip service to solving the problem of bullying in the workplace by launching anti-bullying initiatives on the one hand, while pushing through legislation that hurts workers and will make them easier targets for bullies on the other?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, I reject the question, but I do acknowledge that WorkSafe has provided this year excellent guidance on the management, detection of bullying in the workplace, and while that hasn't resulted in an increase in bullying, it has certainly resulted in an increase in people feeling confident enough to speak up, and I think that's exactly the sort of workplace framework this government is looking for.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Denise Roach.
I seek leave to table the research from Victoria University Centre of Labour, Employment and Work entitled Public Servants Want to Make a Difference, which actually says that public service organisations have high rates of bullying.
No further explanations needed. It's a research document done by the University of Victoria. Leave us sought to table. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled. Question. Point of order, Honourable Jerry Brown.
Now, Mr Speaker, just in relation to this question, I've left it till now to ask, is it appropriate that a question gets on the sheet that in its second part presupposes an answer to the first part? And if you look at it there, sir, it says, therefore, make it harder. So that is a supposition that is unreasonable for anyone to make prior to the first part of that question being answered. I'm just suggesting that if we're going to get better answers to questions, as you are requiring, there needs to be greater scrutiny of the questions that are being put on the sheet each day.
Order. Order. I'll hear from Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question asks, does he have any concerns that the changes, etc., and therefore will weaken workers' rights, and therefore the point made by Mr. Brownlee, it seems to me, actually is not valid?
Order. I'll hear from the Right Honourable Winston.
Speaker, if someone wishes to question what is in a question before this House, the time to raise it is before the question is asked. Not wake up, the last guy to wake up in the House.
Order.
And then find a problem with it, Jerry.
The member can resume his seat. The question has been raised before the question is formally asked in this House. It has been accepted. It's on the order paper. We are going to proceed with the question, but I will certainly have a look at the point that's been raised by Honourable Jerry Brownlee. Question number 8, Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister